The office had emptied hours ago, leaving only the steady hum of fluorescent lights and the quiet whir of computers. The clock read nearly 10, and the once bustling workspace now felt cavernous, with shadows stretching across polished floors. Every keystroke echoed faintly, punctuating the silence. He leaned back in his chair, a 22-year-old man with restless energy masked behind tired eyes, and rubbed his temples. The late-night grind wasn't supposed to feel this personal. Then she appeared. The 40-year-old American Caucasian woman, his boss, moved with a natural elegance that made the space feel smaller, warmer somehow. Her long black hair fell in a sleek cap. He noticed the subtle details first, the soft click of her heels on the hardwood, the faint scent of jasmine lingering in the air, and the way her eyes softened as they scanned the room. When she paused at his desk, leaning slightly to check a document, their shoulders brushed just enough to send a shiver up his spine. It was accidental, or maybe it wasn't, but it left him acutely aware of the warmth radiating from her. "Still here?" she asked, her voice low and melodic, carrying that gentle authority that had always unsettled and fascinated him in equal measure. There was a softness behind the words, a curious attention that made his chest tighten. He nodded, suddenly aware of how loud his own heartbeat sounded in the quiet office. As she stood there, just a few inches away, the subtle details captivated him. The faint laugh lines framing her dark brown eyes, the way her lips curved into a slight smile, the poised grace in the tilt of her head. Every movement felt deliberate yet effortless, like she existed in a world slightly apart from the fluorescent-lit office, yet entirely aware of his presence. He forced himself to focus on work, scanning through spreadsheets with jittery concentration, but her proximity was distracting. The brush of her hand against a stack of papers sent an unexpected warmth along his forearm. His mind raced with questions he didn't dare voice. Curiosity mingled with a growing, unspoken tension. How could someone so composed, so self-assured, make the office feel charged with something unspoken? There was a delicate balance in the air, a blend of professionalism and something else, a quiet connection that hadn't existed in the day's bright chaos. He felt that one lingering glance, the faintest tilt of her head toward him, the way the desk lamp caught her hair just so. It was enough to make staying late feel different, like the night held a secret meant just for them. By the time she walked back toward her office, the office felt transformed. The sterile lighting seemed softer, the silence less empty. He realized he hadn't noticed the time passing, not because of work, but because of her presence. And for the first time, staying late didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like an opportunity. The office had settled into a quiet rhythm, the kind that only late nights seemed to cultivate. He sat at his desk, eyes flicking between the spreadsheet on the 40-year-old American Caucasian woman, his boss, with her long black hair falling like a curtain of silk over her shoulders, paused beside his desk. She wore a soft cashmere sweater over a pencil skirt tonight, a more relaxed look than her usual structured blazer, yet did nothing to diminish her graceful presence. "Burning the midnight oil again?" she asked, leaning lightly on the edge of his desk. The soft timbre of her voice seemed to pull the room closer, wrapping him in warmth. He looked up, startled by how natural it felt to be talking with her like this, away from the usual daytime tension. The conversation began casually, almost innocently. She asked about his week, about the small rituals he had at his desk, the coffee mug adorned with an inside joke, the little photo frame tucked in the corner. Her attention to these minor details made him feel seen in a way that was... When she laughed softly at a comment he made, the sound was light and musical, lingering in the quiet office. She reached over to straighten a misaligned stack of papers, and her fingertips brushed his hand, just for a moment, but it sent an unexpected warmth up his arm. He swallowed hard, acutely aware of how close she was. Her eyes met his, dark brown and steady, carrying a softness that contradicted her otherwise professional demeanor. There was an intimacy in the casualness, a bridge forming between them that felt entirely unspoken yet profoundly real. He noticed the faint fragrance of jasmine lingering around her, mingling with the warmth of the office, creating a subtle sensory cocoon that made the space feel almost separate from the world outside. Every glance, every smile, every small touch of her hand on the papers or his forearm carried a weight that was thrilling and slightly forbidden. By the time the conversation drew to a natural pause, he realized that the minutes had slipped away unnoticed. The mundane office had transformed into a space of quiet connection, where words and gestures carried significance beyond their surface. He felt a gentle tug of longing and curiosity, aware that each late-night encounter was slowly unraveling the barriers between professional courtesy and personal intrigue. Even as she stepped back toward her office, leaving him with a soft smile that lingered in his vision, he understood that this was only the beginning, a delicate dance of attention, subtle touches, and unspoken emotions that would define the slow burn of what was quietly blooming between them. The office felt smaller tonight, though nothing had changed except the way he noticed her presence. The 22-year-old man tried to focus on the spreadsheet before him, but every now and then, the brush of her hair or the faint scent of her perfume made his thoughts drift. The 40-year-old American Caucasian woman, his boss, moved with effortless grace as she approached his desk again, long black hair falling like silk over the curve of her shoulders, soft cashmere hugging her figure. Tonight, she wore dark slacks and a loose blouse that accentuated her confident posture, yet the casualness made her seem more approachable, more human. "I think you might have overlooked a detail here," she said softly, pointing at a section of the spreadsheet. He leaned over to follow her finger, and their shoulders brushed in the tight space. The contact was fleeting, almost accidental, yet sent a warmth shooting through him that was impossible to ignore. His breath hitched subtly, awareness sharpening with every slight movement she made. Her dark brown eyes held steady on his, but there was a softness there now, a subtle invitation to notice her in a way he hadn't allowed himself before. He tried to focus, to anchor himself in professionalism, but the gentle tilt of her head and the faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips made it difficult. He caught himself imagining the warmth of her hand lingering on his arm longer, and the thought made him shift uncomfortably, aware of the electricity in the air. She leaned a little closer to point something out, and the soft brush of her hair against his shoulder was accidental in its phrasing, yet intentional in its effect. The faint scent of jasmine wrapped around him, comforting yet tantalizing, making his heart pound. He realized how much he was attuned to her presence, the subtle shift of her weight, the quiet elegance of her gestures, the way her eyes seemed to hold stories he wanted to hear. For her part, she didn't seem unaware of the tension she was creating. There was a subtle grace in the way she paused, allowing a beat to linger, letting him adjust or respond. She didn't rush, didn't force interaction, yet the intimacy of proximity was undeniable. Every time her fingers brushed a document or hovered near his, it left a tangible warmth that seemed to echo in the quiet office. He tried to focus on the work, scrolling through rows of data, but each time their hands nearly touched while adjusting papers, or their elbows brushed while reaching for the same pen, it felt significant. The tension was delicate, like a string pulled taut, humming with anticipation. Finally, she straightened and smiled lightly, that confident yet gentle expression that made him feel simultaneously admired and exposed. The subtle closeness of the night had revealed something unspoken: curiosity, attraction, and a sense that this slow, deliberate tension was just beginning. The office, once just a space for work, had become a stage for unspoken desire. Each brush of hair, each fleeting touch, each shared glance and note in a melody neither of them could ignore. By the time she walked back to her office, he felt the lingering heat of proximity, his chest still fluttering from the small, accidental moments that had spoken volumes without a single word. And in that quiet hum of fluorescent lights and computer fans, he knew the night had changed everything. The office was quieter now than it had ever been. The glow of the desk lamp cast soft halos across the polished surfaces, and the hum of the computers seemed almost melodic in the background. The 22-year-old man sat at his desk, chest still fluttering from the accidental closeness moments earlier, when she returned to his side, not just as a boss, but as someone opening a small window into her world. The 40-year-old American Caucasian woman, long black hair falling in waves over her shoulders, paused beside him, her posture relaxed yet radiating quiet confidence. Tonight, she wore a soft cream blouse tucked into tailored navy pants, the gentle folds of fabric emphasizing her graceful movements. Her dark brown eyes, usually measured and controlled, now carried a subtle vulnerability, a glimpse behind the composed exterior. "You ever feel like all the decisions you've made were just guessing at the right moment?" she asked softly, leaning slightly on his desk. There was no judgment in her tone, only quiet reflection. The words pulled him in, curiosity and concern mingling as he looked up to meet her gaze. He noticed the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the soft laugh lines that suggested years of both joy and struggle, and the gentle curve of her lips as she spoke, almost hesitant. She shifted slightly, the soft brush of her hand against a stack of papers sending an unintentional warmth across his arm. His heart skipped a beat, but he tried to focus on the weight of her words rather than the electric thrill of her proximity. "I've had nights like this before," she continued, voice lowering as though confiding a secret. "Moments when the office is empty and all you hear is your own doubt." Her gaze met his, steady yet quietly searching, and he felt an unexpected sense of honor being trusted with her vulnerability. The 22-year-old felt a rare connection forming, not through flirtation, but through honesty, through the quiet sharing of human imperfection. He reached instinctively for the stack of papers she had been adjusting earlier, brushing against her fingers in a fleeting contact that neither pulled away from nor lingered too long. The gentle warmth of her skin, combined with the vulnerability in her eyes, made his chest tighten. Every instinct whispered caution, yet every fiber of his being wanted to remain in that shared silence, that delicate intimacy that was neither inappropriate nor forced. She exhaled softly, a small, almost imperceptible sigh, and he noticed how even the smallest movements, the tilt of her head, the way her fingers curled around the pen, carried meaning. There was trust in her gestures, and in return, a growing sense of protectiveness and admiration stirred in him. He realized that these moments of vulnerability were as intoxicating as any touch, more compelling than any casual office interaction he had experienced. When she finally stood, adjusting her blouse with deliberate grace, her dark eyes lingered on his for a heartbeat longer than necessary. That simple gesture spoke volumes. Recognition, warmth, and the unspoken understanding that the quiet office had become a space for more than work. It had become a space for connection, for trust, for something that neither could fully name yet. As she walked back to her office, he felt the gentle echo of her presence lingering in the room, a quiet warmth that made him aware of more than just admiration. He was beginning to understand that slow, deliberate intimacy didn't always need words or gestures. Sometimes it was built on vulnerability, shared silently in the glow of late-night lamps and the hum of empty offices. The office felt charged tonight, though the reason wasn't the fluorescent lights or the quiet hum of computers. It was her presence, the 40-year-old American Caucasian woman, long black hair cascading over her shoulders, poised and graceful, yet somehow softer in the late-night glow. She moved with the same quiet confidence he had come to notice over weeks of staying late. But tonight, there was an added warmth in her eyes, a subtle invitation that he couldn't quite name. "You've been working hard," she said, her voice calm, velvety, carrying that rare combination of authority and intimacy. She leaned slightly toward him, not enough to invade space, but just enough for her proximity to be felt in the most personal way. Her fitted blouse caught the desk lamp's glow, highlighting the gentle curves of her figure, a figure that exuded elegance and quiet confidence. He became acutely aware of her presence, the faint scent of jasmine, the warmth radiating from her side, the soft brush of her hand adjusting the papers near him. "Consider this your reward for staying late," she whispered, her words lingering in the air like a secret promise. The phrasing wasn't bold, not daring, yet it held a weight that made his chest tighten. She reached out, lightly placing a hand near his shoulder, a touch that was meant to guide, yet the lingering warmth left him aware of every nerve in his arm. It was a deliberate gentleness, a subtle acknowledgement of his effort, but the intimacy of the moment made it feel far more than that. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, he noticed the slight curve of her lips, the quiet satisfaction of someone who recognized dedication. The dark brown of her eyes seemed to hold a softness, a subtle gleam of approval, but also an unspoken curiosity, a hint that she, too, felt the tension threading between them. The office around them had disappeared. It was just the two of them, the quiet hum of machinery fading into the background, leaving only the weight of proximity, the electric warmth of shared attention, and the unspoken pull of mutual desire. She shifted slightly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and he felt a flutter of heat ripple through him. Her movements were effortless, yet each one seemed designed to draw attention, not force it, like the gentle cadence of a melody that seeps into consciousness without shouting. He was acutely aware of the subtle rhythm of her gestures, the way her fingertips brushed the papers, the tilt of her head as she spoke. Everything about her spoke of grace, of confidence, and of a quiet acknowledgement that he mattered in this moment, more than just as an employee. A laugh escaped her softly, the kind that seemed to fill the empty office with warmth, and he realized how profoundly her attention affected him. Every brush of her hand, every glance, every carefully measured word made his pulse quicken. The reward wasn't in words, wasn't in any tangible object. It was in the subtle, deliberate attention, in the warmth of her presence, in the recognition of effort and care that she bestowed with an intimacy that felt carefully balanced between professional and personal. As she straightened and walked back toward her office, the glow from the lamp highlighted the sleek lines of her figure and the gentle sway of her hair. He remained frozen for a heartbeat, aware of the lingering warmth on his shoulder, aware of the quiet thrill of proximity, aware of a tension that had shifted from casual curiosity into something more tangible, something that would shape every late night to come. The office had quieted to a gentle hum, the late-night atmosphere soft and warm under the glow of desk lamps. The 22-year-old man sat, his thoughts still lingering on the subtle reward she had given him earlier, a fleeting touch, a glance that carried more than words could convey. Every detail of her presence had etched itself into his awareness. The soft sway of her long black hair, the gentle scent of jasmine, the poised confidence that seemed effortless yet deeply inviting. The 40-year-old American Caucasian woman returned to his desk, dressed tonight in a fitted blouse and dark trousers that accentuated her graceful posture. Her dark brown eyes met his with an expression that was softer than usual, warm yet contemplative, carrying a subtle, unspoken acknowledgement of the moments they had shared over the past few hours. As she leaned slightly to glance at the papers in front of him, the faint brush of her fingers against his arm caused a shiver to run up his spine, a mix of nervousness and anticipation that left him acutely aware of her presence. They shared a quiet laugh over a small mistake in a spreadsheet, and the sound was light, almost musical, filling the space between them with an ease that contrasted the earlier tension. It was a private moment, intimate in its simplicity, as if the rest of the world had fallen away. He noticed the subtle shift in her posture as she settled slightly closer, the careful way she angled herself so that their proximity felt natural rather than forced. The warmth of her shoulder was near enough to make his pulse quicken, and the soft fragrance of her perfume lingered in the air, a comforting yet thrilling reminder of her closeness. She paused, adjusting a stack of papers, her hand brushing against his again, just enough for him to feel the warmth, but not enough to be intrusive. Her eyes met his in that quiet, deliberate way that seemed to convey more than words could express. There was trust there, a delicate recognition of shared understanding, of connection that had grown slowly and deliberately over these late-night hours. He felt seen in a way that transcended the professional, a quiet acknowledgement that mattered more than any praise or reward. In that silence, a rhythm formed, a subtle dance of glances, soft gestures, and shared space. Every movement she made, from the tilt of her head to the gentle sweep of her hair behind her shoulder, carried weight. He became hyper-aware of the faint brush of her sleeve against his arm, the warmth of her proximity, the delicate energy that flowed between them. Each interaction, though small, deepened the emotional bond, creating a tension that was tender, respectful, and intoxicating. When she finally straightened and offered a soft smile, it was loaded with meaning, acknowledgement, encouragement, and the quiet promise of more moments like this. He watched her retreat to her office, noting the gentle sway of her long black hair, the poise in her stride, and the lingering warmth she had left behind. The office felt different now, transformed by the shared intimacy, the quiet laughter, and the subtle, deliberate closeness. For the first time, he understood that romance didn't need grand gestures. It could exist in small touches, shared smiles, and the unspoken understanding that two hearts were quietly drawing nearer in the glow of late-night lights. The night had deepened, yet the office still glowed softly under the warm hum of desk lamps. The 22-year-old man sat quietly, reflecting on the hours he had spent with her. The 40-year-old American Caucasian woman, graceful and confident, with long black hair cascading over her shoulders. Each encounter tonight had layered their connection. Subtle touches, shared smiles, moments of vulnerability that lingered in the spaces between words. The office, once a sterile environment of routine, had transformed into a landscape of quiet intimacy. She approached his desk one final time, dressed in a tailored blazer over a soft blouse, her presence at once commanding and gentle. Her dark brown eyes met his, holding a warmth that made his chest tighten with a mix of anticipation and tenderness. He noticed the faint smile lines at the corners of her eyes, the softness in her expression, and the subtle grace in the way she moved. It was a presence that made every late night feel purposeful, every shared glance weighted with meaning. "Thank you for staying late tonight," she said softly, her voice carrying a quiet sincerity. She leaned slightly toward him, her shoulder brushing his just enough to make him aware of the warmth and proximity without intruding. The scent of jasmine lingered, familiar and comforting, wrapping the room in a cocoon of quiet familiarity. His heart raced, yet the moment felt safe, balanced between professional respect and personal connection. She rested her hand lightly on his shoulder for a heartbeat longer than necessary, a subtle gesture that conveyed acknowledgement, appreciation, and something more, a gentle promise of shared understanding and connection. The warmth of her touch, the slight pressure of her hand, left an imprint that lingered long after she had moved back. It was in these small, deliberate moments that he felt the depth of their bond, the quiet thrill of intimacy, not in words or overt gestures, but in attention, presence, and recognition. As she straightened, adjusting her blazer with practiced grace, her gaze met his once more. There was no need for words. The silence between them carried everything: trust, admiration, curiosity, and the sense that their connection had shifted into something quietly profound. He understood that these moments of closeness, subtle and deliberate, had created a bridge between them, one built on respect, warmth, and the slow burn of unspoken attraction. "See you tomorrow," she said finally, a soft smile playing at her lips. She turned toward her office, the light catching the sleek line of her long black hair, the graceful sway of her steps, leaving him with the gentle echo of her presence. He remained seated for a moment, aware of the lingering warmth, the quiet thrill, and the emotional fulfillment that came from sharing these late hours with her. The office, once just a place of work, had become a space of connection. As he packed up his things and stepped into the night, he carried with him the memory of gentle touches, shared laughter, and lingering glances, the realization that slow, deliberate intimacy could leave a mark deeper than words ever could. The night air was crisp against his skin, but it couldn't compare to the warmth that lingered in his chest, a quiet anticipation for the next time their paths would cross. And in that moment, he understood that their connection was more than fleeting. It was the start of something tender, meaningful, and entirely their own.